What we're going to be doing in this video, like I said in the previous one, is setting up our third-person character. So previously we imported it, so character, third person, here like so. We don't have any sort of animation blueprint or anything to control it. That's what we're going to be working on. So I want to go ahead and create the animation blueprint. So I'm going to right click, animation, animation blueprint, and it's going to be for the third person character skeleton. So press OK. Let's give it a name of ANMBP underscore third underscore person underscore character. Open that on up, and we're just going to simply create a new state machine. And plug it right in. Right, open that state machine. We're going to drag off the entry point, add a state. I'm going to call this one idle run. And this currently has no animations in it, but we will work on that because we're going to be creating a blend space. So go to the event graph real quick, and I'm going to open up our first person blueprint, our animation blueprint as well, to have it set up pretty much the exact same way. So we can see for variables, we have is aiming, a reference to the character, and an enum for our weapon ID. So we're going to create those. So in our third person blueprint, that is not what I meant. Create a new variable, call it character, and set the type to Nazi zombie character, object reference. Create a new variable, call it aiming. It's going to be a boolean. And create a new one called weapon ID. That's going to be our weapon ID. Compile and save, and let's start. So in our event graph, we're going to right click, search for begin play, and you'll have event blueprint begin play. What we're going to do is we're going to take our try get pawn owner. We're going to cast it to Nazi zombie character. And if that cast is successful, we're going to set our character. So now what we're going to do is we're going to drag off this character. Well, actually, we can copy pretty much everything from here, from our animation blueprint, because we have it set up. So everything under the update animation, I'm going to simply copy, delete this, and paste. Compile and save. So now we just have some small issues. So the is aiming. So I named it wrong. So the variable is called is aiming. So we're going to change this from aiming to is aiming. Then we have the issue with the weapon ID. So it's called current weapon ID. And ours is called weapon ID. So let's change this to match it. So current weapon ID, compile, and save. So now we have that set up. Next, we're going to go to the animation graph. And first off, we're going to separate the upper and the lower body. So we're going to create a blend space. So back in our third person character, we're going to right click, animation. We're going to make a blend space 1D for the third person character skeleton. I'm going to call this one BS underscore idle run. Open it up. Over here, you're going to have the horizontal axis. We're going to give it a name of speed. And our speed, like our player's velocity, is what's going to be is what's going to drive this animation. So we're going to set the maximum value to 600 because that's our current max speed. And we're going to drag out the corresponding animations. So we have our third person idle. That's going to be at the very beginning. Then we have our third person walk, which is going to be at the end. So here's our idle. And here's our walk. I didn't bother animating the upper body as that's getting replaced by our weapon animations. So now we just hit save. Actually, better yet, open up that blend space again. We're going to take the walking, we're going to drag it to the very middle. So that way, whenever we create the run animation, we just plug that in over here and we'll have a smooth transition between walking and running. Now we hit save and close it. Back in our animation blueprint, we have our state machine. I'm going to rename it and call it lower body. So in our idle run, Open that up. We're going to drag out this blend space that we just created and connect it. Compile and save. So now we just need a variable called speed to control it. So let's create a new variable and call it speed and change it to a float. Then we're going to drag this variable out, make a get, and plug it right in. So now if you see, I'll set the speed default value to 300. Player's walking, set it back down to 100, walking slower, set it to 0, he's back to idle. So we now have that. Now we just need a way to control our speed. So off of our character, I'm just going to go to the end here. We're going to do get, what was it? Get movement component or get move? I think it's get movement component. Wait, no, let's do, yeah, we'll do get velocity off of the character. We'll get the length, so vector length, and this is going to be our speed. So let's set the speed to vector length. So I'm going to clean this up a bit. And Unreal Engine is deciding to lock up. Oh, come on. Right. Ooh. Don't freeze up on me. I'll go ahead and hit compile. And save it just in case it just has to crash. Okay, I'm going to save. I don't know what it caused that. I think it was Visual Studio with ReSharper. Right. So we compile save. We now have our speed variable. So back to the anim graph. We have our lower body. Now we need to create the upper portion, similar to how we did over here with our blend poses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and this. So our blend poses and our current weapon ID. Go to our anim third person blueprint, paste it in, and move it kind of out of the way. So now we want to create some state machines just like these. So this will be for our weapon animations. We currently have none, so I'm not going to be too concerned about it. First off, let's go ahead and actually test and make sure that the lower body is working. So we're going to go to Blueprint Classes, Player, Nazi Zombie Character, select the mesh. We're going to change it to our third person character and set the animation class to our third person character animation blueprint. So now, whenever we test with two clients, we should hopefully see the legs and stuff moving, which we do. So that's good to go. Now let's go ahead and create the animation montages for the upper body. So we're gonna go to our third person, animations, 1911. We're gonna right click, animation, animation montage, and set the third person character skeleton for it. So I'm gonna call it AM underscore TP underscore 1911. I just realized I messed up the naming for these animations, but we're gonna go ahead and open this up. And we're gonna do the same kind of thing we did with the first person. So this is for the 1911. So we're gonna drag out the ADS fire and the hip fire for the 1911. All right, I just realized I'm gonna have to reset the hip fire, but that's not a big deal because I exported it with much too long of an animation. So I'm gonna go ahead and actually just fix that very quickly. Okay, did I just not export it? 11. And let me re-import it real quick. Fire. Let's see, how long's the... Yeah, so that's 100 frames. Re-import. There we go. So back in our montage. Okay, I'm going to delete you and I guess drag you back out again. There we go. Okay, so now we have our two animations. Now we need to create some sections. So we're going to right click, new montage section, call it fire ADS, just like our first one. Go over here, create a new one, call it fire hip. Then we're going to click on our default and delete it. Now we can drag our fire hip to be lined up just like so. Go to our montage sections and hit clear, so they're not going to be looping. Then we can just save. So we now have our animation montage for our 1911. So let's go ahead and set that up and we'll give it a test. So we're going to create a new state machine. I'm just going to copy this lower body state machine. And I want to give it a name of 1911. Open it up. Change this to, I guess, hip idle. Open that up. Delete the blend spaces. And we're going to go to the 1911 hip idle. We're going to grab that animation and plug it in. We're going to drag off and do a new state. Call it ADS idle. And we're going to connect these two. So we have this one here for the condition. And this condition is going to be is aiming. The other condition to go back to hip idle is going to be not aiming. So we're going to drag off and do a not, like so. And save that. And come back here. So now we need to right click, search for slot. You'll have slot default slot. I should really name it differently. Then we're going to click this and plug it into Colt 1911 pose. And then we're going to do is we're going to plug that in here to the result. As you can see, he is playing the 1911 animations. That's great. So now when we test it, he'll be playing, like he's holding the gun, like so. Also, one thing I just realized that I forgot, you have to create a socket on the third person character. So open up the skeleton. I meant to do that in the previous video. Go down to weapon grip. You're going to right click, add a socket. You're going to name it S_weapon socket, spelled exactly like this. And that's all. So now we need to pretty much separate the upper body and the lower body, because currently, if we look at him, as we walk around, his legs are just sliding. Boo. He's kind of skiing around. So let's do that. So we're going to right click, search for blend by, or let's see, blend bone. Let's see, search for bone. Oh, what's it called? Poses by, no, layered blend per bone. That's what it is. What we're going to do is we're going to drag this lower body up to the top, and along with the layered blend. We're going to plug the layered blend right into there, and the blend poses enum to our blend poses 0, and the lower body to our base pose. So now clicking on here, we're going to click this little drop down for layered setup, 0. We're going to add another element, drop it down, and we're going to have to give it a name. So let's look at our skeleton real quick. And we need to separate the upper and the lower body, so we can look at which bones to do that. We look at our pelvis, rotate it. No, that's obviously not it. We look at our, go down a little bit, we have our spine. Oh, look at that. Rotates and everything quite nicely. So we're going to use spine_01. So under bone name, we're going to do spine_01. Compile and save. Now you can see he's got the legs playing the idle animation, as well as the upper body playing the hip idle animation. So now, let's look. We have our third person character. He's moving around and he's playing the animation for the gun. We already have our, let's see, do I have the wrong aiming animation playing or something? Let me look. 1911. Oh, that's right. We never plugged in the ADS idle. So go over here to ADS idle for the 1911, drag it off, and connect it. This is for our ADS idle state. Compile and save. And now we can actually see him aiming. That's what I messed up. So here, you can see, he's aiming in just nicely. We haven't set up the animation montage, but that'll be done in the next video. But yeah, we pretty much have our setup just about done. The only thing we need to do now is set up the animations for the M1 carbine. So I know this is getting exhausting. Go to 1911, especially considering I literally have done this twice. Go to our animation montage, kind of Control W, and drag it to our M1 carbine, and hit move here. So let's rename it. So we're going to change 1912 to M1 carbine. Open that on up. We're going to change these animations out. So we're going to delete the hip fire for the 1911 and drag out the M1 carbine hip fire. Then delete the ADS fire, drag out the M1 carbine ADS fire, move the ADS fire to the left, and they are good to go. Now we just simply save it, go back to our animation blueprint, third person character, go to the animation graph. We're going to copy the state machine in the default slot, Control P, paste it. Let's change this one to M1 carbine, open it up, and let's change our hip idle to be our 1911 hip idle. I mean our M1 carbine hip idle, sorry, and our ADS idle to our ADS idle. Compile and save, and link this up to our M1 carbine pose. Actually kind of curious, let me check something. Can we just do the default slot after? Ignore what I'm doing, unless it works. Let me check. Oh, right, I forgot it's not actually going to play the animation because we haven't set that up yet. So I'm just going to Control Z, and I'll test it later on. So compile save. I'm going to remove this STG44 pose because we do not have the animation set for it. But now we are ready to test the M1 carbine. So going back to player, Nazi zombie character, under the starting weapon, let's select the M1 carbine and see what it looks like. Okay, so we have the walking around just fine. We can aim, and all that's working out all fine and dandy. So up next, actually I'm gonna, let's see, yeah, that is everything currently. So in the next video, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be setting up the animation montages to play for the third person character. So that way, we're no longer having just first person animations play. We're going to be having the third person animation montages play as well. So that way we'll actually see the character reacting to the recoil and that kind of stuff. So that will be covered in the next video. So I will see you then.